Hello, I'm Sean McAngus, and this is the Highland League podcast. Today's guest is former Devon Vale, Fraserburgh, and Cove Rangers player Grant Smith. He talks about starring alongside players like a young Jim Leighton at Devon Vale, trophy success, scouting young players for Aberdeen, and much more. Hope you enjoy this interview.
At the beginning, were you always wanting to kind of pursue football in some
I
fun?
was pretty serious about football for an early age. My dad was used to come up and play football in the park when I was a young boy. We bed just in the kind of playing fields as you come into Port Soy on the left hand side. My house that was brought up and butted onto the back of that park, so it was just a jump out of the fence for me. And I was lucky. The guys, I mean, didn't see it now the same, but we just played football. That's all we did. There was no gaming or any other hobbies, so we just ended up playing football. And the guys that I played with were all mad keen. Played with a lot of older boys. I mean, I never had any coaching, really. Scant kind of coaching at primary school from my headmaster, Mr. Dick. He was a really good guy, and he started the football and ended up playing for the north of Scotland. But just played football in the park, up in the morning, in the holidays, played literally from dawn to dusk. And even then, there was lights on, street lights, and we played. It sounds a bit cliched, but that's how we learnt to play football. And even when I started playing Highland League, I was going up on the Sunday mornings to the football park. I played two guys were just as serious as me. Mike Herbertson, I don't know if you heard of Mike's name. Mike was a striker. He played junior and a bit of Highland League as well, played for the Vale. And Neil Clark, it was the goalie for the Broch. And the three of us just used to go and shoot into each other and cross bars in and volley them and header them. And I never ever got fed up with it. I think I might have been a bit OCD as a youngster, I think.
Mm-hmm. But do you think maybe in a way these days kids are maybe a bit overcoached? Because if you see the amount of how young you see 5-year-olds and stuff going into Aberdeen long term.
And the problem I have with that as well is you're ruling out a hell set of guys that are late developers. And I mean, I used to scout for Aberdeen, and I've had this debate with my bosses in there a couple of times we never looked at late developers as a club. So when I was suggesting guys that were playing by Highland League football, just got knocked back every time. The attitude is if we haven't coached them, they're not that good. And I used to say to my gaffer, Colin, well, if this guy's as good as the guy that you've been coaching for 7 years, then we better coach and he'll become a better player. But there's a few exceptions that are very few and far between. I think it is just the culture of Scottish football, and it's something that it's one of my hobby horses. Please don't ask me that question, because I'll give you a lecture for a couple of hours. I just think that we overlook late developers in this country, and we mark up our mind about players when they're far too young.
So in terms, you mentioned representing for North of Scotland, what kind of experience was that like? It
was primary. I started North of Scotland, and I remember vividly, I was quite a shy kind of young lad, and I was conscious about myself, and I remember being invited along, and I thought, wow, I'm not sure if I'll manage to do this. But Ian Cole, that was a teacher at Buckie High School, ironically enough, where I work at just now, he persuaded me to go along and played a few North of Scotland matches at primary level. And then I'd played some North of Scotland and secondary level as well, and played a lot of secondary school football for Banff Academy. Great memories, playing with lads that I played all the way through into my playing career. And again, wasn't a lot of coaching. We had guys, Bob Peden, Joe Campbell, just kind of the techie teacher, the science teacher. Charlie Ross was the guy at Banff Academy who had a great influence on a lot of players at that time. Charlie, I think, played for maybe Stenhousemuir. He was a goalie, and he was just an absolute cracker of a guy, taught you how to play the game properly. But again, didn't really overcoach, just let you go and enjoy it. And the catchment area at Banff, I mean, you've obviously got connections down there, have you?
Yeah. I went to Banff Academy and stuff.
Oh, you're a Banff Academy boy, yeah?
Yeah. I went to Banff.
I know, and so I think school football and one of my hobby horses in my latter stages of my life, when I've been a teacher and I've been coaching the high school team, we did it for years, and I did the North of Scotland team with John Mackay that used to play for Brora, and Gus Day that's playing for Nairn County now. He came through our system, and the school football, I think, is much maligned. I had arguments again with senior clubs, and to be fair to the clubs, County, Carley and Aberdeen, I think they have changed their opinion on letting people play school football. I mean, for me, the more games you can play, the more experience that you have, the better player you will become. In North of Scotland, I think senior clubs look at school teams and think, it's just a Johnny. But I'll tell you what, some of these Johnnies and teachers that give up their time are really good coaches, and they're really good coaching with kids. And I think it's an opportunity that we deny kids if we didn't let them play, which a lot of the senior clubs do. They just think school football isn't good enough for their players.
I noticed in a podcast that you'd done before that you kind of got offered a trial and didn't end up going down to Aston Villa. Were there any other kind of opportunities to?
No, well, Aston Villa one was my mom. She just thought I was, and back then, I mean, you've got to bear in mind, this would probably been 1970, 71, when I would have just been either in finishing primary or starting secondary school. Birmingham was a long way away. I was playing a North of Scotland game down at Perth, and I'd played an absolute blinder, and Aston Villa coach came up and asked my mum and dad if I would go down in trials, and my mum just said no, it's too far away, and I never thought nothing about it. But kind of wasn't long after that, like a Desi Bremner went down to Villa, and no, I just think I just accepted it. When I was playing for the Vale, Billy McNeil was speaking about possibly having a look at man, take him in for a couple of weeks trial, but again, that just never happened back then. If you were a Highland League player, you were deemed, unless you were extra special. Like, when there was guys that made that transition, guy played for Inverness Thistle, was it Kevin McDonald?
I think so.
Aye, and Ian Wilson, I remember Ian Wilson going to Leicester City, but they were exceptionally talented boys, and they made the jump from Highland League football to that level. I'm not sure if I would have made it at that level, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so it's just been the sort of thing that's kind of hovered and been talked of, not really.
No, it's never went in for trial or anything like that. And I think as you grow up and you find your level, I was happy playing Highland League and junior football. I really enjoyed it. I've made some great friends. I've had some great experiences. And I didn't really feel cheated or feel, I could have been a professional football player. I've had a great life. I've had 2 great careers and 2 different jobs. And I didn't feel the slightest bit wounded that I didn't become a professional football player.
Yeah. So in terms of, obviously you went on, played kind of welfare league and then came to the Vale. How did you find kind of the switch from welfare to Highland League? Was it a fair jump, or
it was brutal to start with? I mean, I was playing in and I was young. I probably would have been 14, 15 when I started playing for Portsoy, my local team, and with a really good side. I mean, we had some absolutely tremendous players, some of which went on to play for Devon Vale as well. Sid Imla played for Devon Vale, Mike Herbertson, and myself was signed for a Vale at the same time. I actually got the chance to sign for Bucky. Danny Fitzsimmons come down and plagued me to sign for Bucky Thistle, but Sandy Gray, I think, was the chairman at the Vale at the time, and he persuaded me that my needs would be better met at the Vale. But when I first started, I think my first game I played, we got beat 10-1 by Inverness Thistle. I mean, it was just an absolute huge jump up at the time, because when I joined the Vale, we were a pretty average outfit. It was just really at the start of the Vale transitioning from the very bottom of the league up through the league. Yeah. And some of the guys that they signed there definitely developed me into being a far better player than I would have been. I think it was when they signed, it was George Christie was the manager. And George was a Johnny for Aberdeen, but just was a football fanatic. And it was a few Aberdeen players, but mostly guys for the local area. And there was a lot of us the same age. There was Mikey Herbertson, there was a guy, Derek Reid, there was Kevin Bremner, Alan Forbes, and we all kind of just came in top together, Sid Imla, and we never thought nothing of it, really. The bravado of the young boy, and I was playing against players that were Highland League legends. I remember playing against Andy Penman. If I played for Rangers, I mind Ian Cummin. If I played for Inverness Thistle, and I remember at half time up there, this was the return game after we got humped 10-1, and I had a great first half. I was absolutely just playing so well. And as we walked off and we were going down the tunnel at half time, Ian Cummin tapped me on the shoulder and he said, am I allowed to swear in this podcast?
Yeah, go on.
So he said, great first half, young man. He says, but I'm going to break your fucking leg the second half. And I completely switched off the second half. I was absolutely shitting myself. And at the end of the game, Ian Cummin come up and said to me, you're a cracking young player, but you cannot let old men like me scare you. You've got to harden up and harden up quickly. And it was a salutary lesson. I'll never forget that.
How important is that side in terms of the mental side and not?
I would say playing at a higher level, what I've found, I've played with lots of players at lots of different levels, and the difference between the guys that go on to play Highland League at a good level or senior football, it's definitely folk who have got a mental resilience and can put up with playing in front of people, putting up with the abuse that you have to put up with playing in front of people, and you have to have that inner belief in that dogged determination to do well. I never really used to listen much to what people were saying at the side. I mean, I heard what they were saying, but I never really listened to it because it's just part of playing at that level. It's part of the fun of it as well. And unless you're going through a really bad phase, which I suppose most players will occasionally do, I never paid much attention, but you do need that mental resilience. The guys that I've known who have been really good players, some of them better players than me, didn't have that mental toughness to play at that level.
Yeah, so any kind of funny memories about the kind of stupid things people have shouted at you over?
I remember playing, I think it was in the latter stages of my career, doing it to the Broch for Cove, and I was out taking a throw in, and every time I went out to take a throw in, as this boy was saying, Smith, you're fucking useless. You're just absolutely shite. You've been shite, and you're still shite. So I just never thought much about it, but into the second half, I thought, I'm just not putting up with this. I put the ball under my arm, and I turned round, and it was a guy called Tony Nardi that I used to work with in BT in Aberdeen, and he just gave me a wink. So, I know you just have to take it. People pay their money, and they're entitled to. It was worse for me when I went to see games. My son was playing. My son, he maybe mind my son better than me. Mike Smith played for Rothes, played for Hermes in Aberdeen. Big 6'4", centre forward, and my pride and joy. I love my boy to bits. I'm so proud of him. And when I used to go to games and watch Mike, you used to hear people sledging your kid. That's worse. I found that harder. I remember going to a game up at Rothes once, and my daughter was with me, and she didn't come to many games, and so she was not used to this tirade of abuse that you would get. And somebody for the crowd shouted I wouldn't even repeat it about her brother, and she turned on him and said, I'll have you know that useless ginger cunt is my brother, and he's a lovely human being. The guy apologised. But I found that more annoying than getting abused myself. I just thought nothing of it.
Yeah. So in terms of your time at the Vale, obviously you played alongside a lot of good players, including Kevin Bremner, as you mentioned. How good a player was he, and did you always think he would have went on?
No, I think we were lucky. We ended up, as I said, in that transition period the Vale were in. And the Vale, if I'm mind right, signed a few players from Peterhead. They signed likes Davy Ross. George Perry was a crucial sign, and he was a brilliant sweeper. Charlie Esselmont, that used to play for Aberdeen, came out and signed for us. Charlie was the first player that I ever met that I thought I was really skillful and talented, and I felt like selling my boots when I saw Charlie playing football. He was just an absolutely different level. But the guy for me, he was Norrie McBain, late Norrie McBain was just like a legend, and he walked into the dressing room with this leather jacket around his shoulders and sunglasses on, and my jaw just hit the deck. And I thought, I'm going to be playing with this guy today. But the guy for me that was one of my biggest influences was a guy called Norman Perry. You wouldn't mind him. He was an older player, and I would have said I modelled my career on Norman Perry. He was incredibly skillful, very talented, but as hard as nails. He just had no fear whatsoever. And I looked up to Norman and thought, I want to be that kind of player. I want to be a midfield player that you didn't mess about with, but they can also play football. And they signed Johnny Cowie at that time as well. You probably wouldn't mind Johnny Cowie. He was part of the Inverness Thistle team that wiped the floor with everybody, and he played up front with a guy called, I think it was Ian Stephen, and the two of them were a deadly combination. And Johnny came to us later on in his years, and his experience really helped our young lads settle down. I've no doubt Abdi thinks it was because we had Jim Leighton in goals, we won the Bells Cup. But I would have said it was definitely Johnny's calming influence on us. And Kevin turned out to be... Kevin actually was like a fullback. He was a bit player. Kevin really wasn't seen as being anything that serious. And I think we had an injury crisis in Tedcastle for Kevin hated, and Ken didn't like Kevin at all, didn't rate him. I think one of the guys said, like, why do you stick Kevin up top, see how he gets on? And honestly, the rest of the say is history. He was at his best, and his best was very regular. He was unplayable. He was absolutely unplayable. One of my greatest memories of my era at the Vale was his dad, Sandy. Sandy was a farmer, and Sandy used to stand at the side of the pitch and give Kevin dog's abuse. But at the same time was incredibly proud of his son, and his chant was, "Give the ball to Kevy!" And that's what he wanted people to do, just feed Kevin. And Kevin was just sensational. He was unplayable at his best. He just used to rumble over people. He didn't jink by them. He just ran over the top of them. He was a tremendous player.
No, he's the sort of player people always kind of remember and kind of reminisce. And
Him and Alan Forbes and me, the same area, Mikey Herbertson, and at training with some incredible sessions at training. So funny. Kevin was a real prankster. Kevin was one of the guys that would just absolutely, anybody new coming into the club would have to go through this passage of rights, so Kevin taking the piss of him. It was just tremendous. Just young loons, really.
Yeah.
And no care in the world, no fear in the world. And like I say, a lot of the older guys that were playing with us, remember Bobby Forsyth that played for the Broch? He came up and played for us. And it was just a really good atmosphere and a really good bunch of people.
Yeah, how important is that in terms of even at times where you may be tired from your kind of full-time jobs? How important is that in terms of keeping you going?
Without a shadow, I do. I think I was lucky that all the clubs I've played in, I had really good dressing rooms, had really good people in the dressing rooms. And what a difference it marks. Because a lot of these guys, I mean, if you're training twice, 2 or 3 times a week, playing on a Saturday, it is a big commitment. And to enjoy it, especially the training and that, when you would go in and have banter with some of these guys. I mean, some of the quality players, I mean, I played with boys like Johnny Markey at the Vale. Johnny Markey should have played senior football. He's one of the best fullbacks I've ever played with. Just like a well-oiled machine. We'd be up and down the right-hand side. Very modern fullback Johnny. I think Johnny would have played in any modern contemporary team because he was quick. He read the game really well, and he could transition from being defending 1 minute to be up in the far end of the box the second minute. He was just a tremendous player.
Yeah. So why do you think he didn't kind of go on and play?
That's just how things were, Sean. There was very few people were looked at to play at a higher level because there's just this. I'm not going to say arrogance because I've still got a lot of friends at Aberdeen Football Club, Simi and Gavin Levy and these guys, and there are really good people. And arrogance isn't the right word, but Scottish football, I think, has got this stigma where it thinks unless someone's came through a club for the age of 8 onwards, then they're not quite as good as the guys that have been doing through that path. And I'm not sure if I believe that anymore. I mean, big Innes Mackay playing for Deveronside Vale. I'd Innes into the Vale, into Aberdeen not for a trial, just to help out one game. And at that time, Innes was quite podgy and quite slow. And he's now developed into this machine. He's a great player. He's got 2 good feet. He's an absolute unit. And I know there's been other Highland League clubs chasing him, but you never see senior clubs taking a chance with players that age.
Yeah. So is he the sort of player you see possibly, going up a bit in terms of the Highland League or in terms of the...
He'll definitely play. The club will definitely sweep him up. I mean, but he's a super boy. He's got a great attitude. He comes from a really good family. I didn't hear any worries about Innes making good choices. He's very loyal, and clearly because the Vale have given him that chance. I mean, Innes played very little welfare league football. He came from school football into welfare league, a few games, into junior, a few games, into Highland League. So he hasn't had a lot of experience, but he'll definitely play for another Highland League club, I'm pretty sure. But give the boys due. He's thankful to the Vale for getting a chance, and although he knows there's clubs, I think, been in for him, he's just doing the proper thing, and that's playing 100% for the club that he's at.
Yeah. So in terms of, you touched on the Bells Cup, how great was in that, and what did you kind of remember about kind of that final?
My pals will tell you that my memory isn't great, but I remember that night really well because we were so relaxed about the game. I think because we were vast underdogs. We were playing up at Huntly in their backyard. They had a really decent team at that time. Some cracking players, Davy Cormie, Charlie Ferris, Dave Watson, mall manager at Cove, I think, was playing for them. And we were just completely relaxed. I mean, it did help having Jim in goals. I mean, Jim was just a tremendous goalkeeper and tremendous lad as well. And I think the game finished 2-2. I remember scoring a penalty. I remember scoring a penalty during the game and then scoring a penalty in the penalties afterwards. And we won it in penalties, and it was a surreal experience because I honestly didn't think we expected to win. I think we either didn't expect to win or we were so confident to win, we just didn't really care much. I can remember just being not the slightest bit nervous on the night, and there was a big crowd. I wasn't the slightest bit nervous for whatever reason. I think I was more nervous at the cup final that was a year after when we played Peterhead in the qualifying cup final. And we drew with them doing it Peterhead 2-2, and we came back to play the Vale, and I think we got beat 2 or 3-1 there. And I missed a penalty in that game, and I remember being really upset at that. But the Bells Cup game just was enjoyable, really enjoyed it. And then we all went back to Banff afterwards, and I mind very little about that. I wasn't a huge drinker at the time, and my goodness me, I drank more that night than I think I'd ever done in my life.
So how great are those kind of days for players in the Highland League in terms of having a day out and feeling like you're kind of, in a way, playing full time because it's a big cup final, it's a vital game?
Again, it's a bit surreal. I remember both the Huntly game and the Peterhead game replay doing at Banff. I think it was 2,500 people were watching it. And it's really surreal because the Vale had a decent crowds when I was playing for them, even at that time. But I mean, the guys that supported the Vale were just characters in themselves. And Duncan Clark, John Steele, ended up working with John at Bucky High School. He was a techie teacher. And the Vale crew used to come along to the games. There was a great atmosphere. But the bigger games were, you dream about playing these games. I've lucky I've had a few of them over my career, spanning over the 20-odd years. And it's fit you play fit before, really. But I would say I never tried any harder in these games than I did every Saturday I played. I would say that I wouldn't brag a lot about myself as a player, but I think I was very consistent. I gave of my all every week.
Yeah, so how did you find playing at Princess Royal Park? You obviously said you got, in terms of a good backing on a regular basis. What was that like?
Well, the pitch itself was, for me, one of the big selling points. The pitch was just magnificent. I mean, you used to go to some Highland League grounds, and it was like playing in mud. Some of the Highland League grounds, you're up to your ankles in mud, or the pitch was hard. But a lot of the pitches I look at now, they're much better quality than they used to be. But at that time, the Vale's ranked high above everything else. So for me, I just loved the size of the pitch and I loved the quality of the pitch. Al Dugan, the groundsman, just took great pride in his pitch, and it was just brilliant to see. It's one of the things I love about Highland League and Junior Football is the players great, but see the people that support these clubs. Guys like Stuart McPherson at Vale, Duncan Liddell was at Cove. It's actually brilliant. These guys are the lifeblood of the club. The players are just what you see at the front, but the guys that come in and wash the strips and see to the turnstiles and mark other organisations, it's just incredible. These guys are the real heroes of Highland League and Junior Football. It's such a thankless job, and they do it without fear or favour. It's just brilliant to see.
Yeah, and the Highland League still remains popular even today. So it's.
I think that, I mean, I've seen a few Highland League games over the years. A lot of the boys that I've coached have gone on to play Highland League football. And I'll catch the odd game. To be honest with you, Sean, I'm not as great a spectator as I should be, having been a scout and stuff like that. I get a bit frustrated watching. I still play. I was playing tonight with the teachers. And if you offered me playing on a Thursday night with the teachers and the students or going to watch a game, I'd say playing every time. But going to these games, I think the quality of the Highland League, boys my age, a lot of them will say to you, oh, Fitba's not as good as it was in our day. I didn't believe that. I think Fitba's actually quicker, pacier, and a lot more skillful than it was at our age. A lot of the guys I played with wouldn't be able to play now because they'd be sent off within 5-10 minutes. Kind of. So I'm not one of these dinosaurs that's criticised as young players. I love seeing Highland League games. I think the style that a lot of these teams try to play is just brilliant to see.
Yeah, and also if you think the amount of quality of players dropping down the division, I mean, some of the names we've had over the years, like so random, like when Darren Mackey played for Tara briefly.
I know. And Russell was playing for Martin.
And like there's heaps and then you've got the boy Paul Coots, who's at Locals now. Who was on the cusp of playing in the English Premiership. Are you thinking
he was a player and a half, though? I mean, he was just absolutely exceptional. He was and again, he was in Aberdeen's doorstep. And that's the kind of thing that I feel we've kind of missed out. And there has been boys that have transferred. Scotty Patterson that I played with at Cove, he transferred into senior football quite successfully. I just don't think we do enough of it. I just think we sometimes, especially in northeast of Scotland, we've got this thing that we're not as good as the rest of Scotland. That if you've got a Glaswegian accent, you're bound to be a better player. And I do think some of the senior clubs believe that. I think they think some of our guys are too nice, they're brought up too well. And I didn't subscribe to that at all.
Yeah, I even found it when I was speaking to people at college about football in general, and I mentioned about the Highland League and the sort of players. And I mentioned I was speaking about Paul Coots going down to England, and they thought, "What? Really?" They're like, "Really?" They found that odd. But I think the problem is I don't think we showcase what we have in terms of the product. We do quite well with the Highland League, I would say quite well, but at the same time, I don't think we boast enough about the players. It's like a lot of the clubs are scared to lose them. It's like they want to keep them because they want to be competitive, which is fair enough.
Absolutely. And that's the dilemma that you'll always have. I mean, I had it when I was scouting for Aberdeen. You would go and watch a game, and I've had coaches coming out to my Aberdeen's Boys Club games and games up here, and I think you're doing like, I'm just watching this guy. I was always open, and I'd always go to the coaches and say, I'm looking at this laddie. And they genuinely, in some cases, didn't want you there. But for me, it's always been about a path for young players. And I had players at my school team and Davy Parrow up at Bucky and I used to, late Davy just died there long ago. It's a huge loss for the Bucky community. And a few years ago, Davy died. And I would have the loons in the morning for the football. He would have them in the afternoon for the junior team. And I was just used to say, well, we'll decide where the boys are playing. And we never had one argument because we were about what was best for the boys. And I think sometimes clubs can just be a bit myopic and they see the opportunity for boys to go and play at a higher level.
Yeah, because it's frustrating because you see so many players and I even see it when I watch games and I think, oh, that player there could easily play, and then you always hear stories, they either get a chance or clubs.
I think it's probably better now with Carley and County in the senior leagues, because at least then that's a pathway in. If you think about the guys that played for Inverness Carley and Inverness Thistle back in the 70s, they would have been playing for like a Ross County, Titch Block, Ray McIntosh, Peter Corbett. These boys were David Mulroy. They would have been playing for Carley. They were so good. But now there is an opportunity for boys, especially in the north, to go and play at a higher level.
So going back to your time at the Vale, you talked a bit about Jim Leighton. What was he kind of like? Obviously, that he was like a youngster at that stage on loan from Aberdeen.
What happened was we were looking for a goalie. I think Jim George had maybe moved on somewhere else, and we were stuck for a goalie. Jim was a tremendous goalie and will be sorely missed. A great character, Jim, as well. And when he left, I think we were stuck for a goalie, and Aberdeen had two keepers along with Bobby Clark. They had John Gardner and they had Jim Leighton, and both John and Jim came out to play a trial game for us. And one of them was going to be destined to play for the Aberdeen Reserves, and one of them was going to be farmed out to the Vale. And it just so happened that Jim was the one who got chosen to play Highland League football. And Jim and I remained friends for years. He was just an absolute gem of a lad, down to earth, a real football man, modest. He was just a gem of a guy to play with. He was so good in the dressing room. And he was such a tremendously talented lad. He was one of these guys that I had, even maybe more so than Ian, I had no doubts that Jim would go on to play international football. He was just so good. And when it went to that penalty shootout in the Bells, I felt sorry for the Huntly guys. Because I think Jim saved two, and maybe they missed one just with the pressure of him being in goals. And it was an easy, comfortable penalties victory. But Jim was just what an asset he was to any team. Folk used to slag Jim's kicking, but I never thought Jim's kicking. Certainly, I can never mind it being bad when he played for us. But back then, of course, a goalie could pick up the ball at any time. It's not like nowadays.
No, it's the sort of thing people forget that he was at the Vale. It's kind of past. Obviously, it's near the beginning, so people seem to.
And it is amazing. I kind of play golf in the same circle as Jim and a couple of his pals, and a lot of guys are astounded. One of the guys that I play golf with regularly, and he plays with us on a Thursday night, he's a Cullen football legend, Stuart Seller. Stuart said to me the other day, so it's Jim Leighton. I says, no, Jim's got a job. He was horrified that Jim would have a job, because he thought, being a professional football player and a team that won a European Cup Winners' Cup, that Jim would have retired with a huge bank balance. But that's just neither why football is then. There wasn't that same amount of capital in the goal. It didn't have changed Jim. I kept in touch with Jim up till he went to Manchester, and then when I went back into Aberdeen to do scouting, I saw him occasionally. Used to socialise a lot with him when we both played with the Vale, because I'd moved into Aberdeen. Yeah. I was working in Aberdeen, I bed in King Street, so Jim and I socialised if we went to the pictures or kind of went to do 10-pin bowling and stuff like that. And he's a really good lad.
Yeah. So going on, in terms of your time at the Vale, who were kind of the best players you played against, would you say?
Played against?
Yeah.
All right, okay, right. So playing against would have to be, for me, like a Charlie Duncan. When Charlie played for Inverness Thistle and then for Peterhead, Charlie was just an absolute exceptional talent. What a guy, what a player he was. I never really was vibed out with anybody playing. Guy Hercher that played for Carlisle was a really good player. Gordon Robertson that played for Buckeye Thistle. Robbie Nichol played for Buckeye Thistle. These were all good players, but I was never ever in awe of these guys. But it was just part of the landscape. You played against good players every week. Charlie Duncan for me, maybe Pele, when Pele played Highland League football, were a couple of outstanding players. Charlie was just he's a legend in the Broch. And I never played with Charlie, but I remember that game at Peterhead. He was playing for Peterhead, and I'd missed a penalty, and I was honestly just about in tears. I was a young boy, and I'll never forget Charlie Duncan coming up and put his arm around me during the game, and he said, "Will you stop it? You've missed a penalty. Plenty of people miss penalties. You've got the ability to win this game for your club, so stop feeling sorry for yourself." And he didn't need to do that. He was just an absolute gem of a bloke. But what a terrific player he was.
Yeah, because people don't really remember him for his, playing.
No, they remember him for being a manager, absolutely.
Yeah.
But no, Charlie was a terrific player. And as I said, Inverness Thistle team at that time, Tichy Bloch was, what a player he was. And Dave Milroy had played for them. You were playing against quality people every week in the Highland League. I mean, I remember playing against Andy Penman and coming home and telling my pals he played for Carly after he played for Rangers, and he was just on a different level altogether. And you're sharing the pitch with some of these guys. But it never vied me out. I never felt intimidated playing against these guys. I had a massive row with Billy Anderson. Billy and I fell out. Yeah. Totally my fault. I was just a young boy, thought he kent better than the manager, and had a massive fight with Billy, and that's why I left with the Vale. I probably would have played all my days with Vale quite happy.
Yeah, so was there like a period of time that you kind of, had a rest from football after that?
Aye, so what I did was I went for the Vale to the Broch. And I just did the season at Broch, but that's among the happiest memories, playing under George Adams. George Adams, probably up with Alan Scott, would be the top managers I played for. I never had experienced this before, but George was a master of psychology. George just knew how to handle players. And because I stayed in Aberdeen, George worked in Aberdeen, and he would pick me up for training during the week, twice a week. What a commitment this guy had. Take me home to his house, feed me, and then we would go to the training in the Broch, and then he would drive by, bed in Ellen, drive past Ellen, drive me back to Aberdeen, and then go back to Ellen. I mean, he did that twice a week without complaint. I used to joke with Derek Adams that I taught Derek how to play football, because I used to be out in the back garden playing football with him all the time. And George was just an incredible manager. He kept everybody in a tight leash, and at that time the Broch had some tremendous football players, but guys who were real free spirits: Jim Crawford, John Duthie, Martin Buchan, Brian Sam, Eddie Garmick, Davy McKenzie. Davy McKenzie would be one of the best players I've ever played with. He was terrific. Bertie Bowie, Dave Oxley. These were our real strong characters. And they didn't ken who to take George. Everybody was petrified of George. And we lost the league that year on the last game of the season. And it was just soul destroying.
Yeah, how did you kind of cope with that? Because losing the league on the final day is kind of the worst.
Well, it was a bit easier for me because I wasn't playing, I was suspended. To this day, George Adams still blames me for losing the league, because I think the second last game of the season, when we went up to Ross County, and we got beat 2-1, and I was in the stand, and it shocked me at the end of the game. George walked by me and looked at me, and George never really got angry, but he could pretend to be angry, and he said, "If we lose the league, it's your fault, because you got suspended after being so many bookings." And I was like, eh? And then the following week, the last game, I was suspended. I was in the stands at Bellesley, and we absolutely humped Peterhead. I think we had to beat Peterhead by 3 or 4 goals, and we thumped them 5 or 6-0. And the result up at Buckie had to go for us, but I think Keith ended up drawing with Buckie, and we lost the league by a point. It was just absolutely sickening.
So was there ever, in terms of Fraserburgh, was there ever an option to stay longer, or were you always...
No, I should have stayed longer, but again, that's why I took my year out. I started a youth club in Portsoy, and I just felt I needed all my time to commit to doing that. I was a pretty free spirit myself. I was pretty independent-minded, and George pleaded with me to stay. In hindsight, it was a huge mistake, because I think then I would have probably gone on to be a far better Highland League player if I'd been around at that club, because some of the players we used to have I mean, if I think about some of the training sessions we had, we used to have, George was really pally with the Aberdeen staff, and we had Teddy Scott used to come out and do training sessions for us. The pre-season at Fraserburgh was, oh my God, it was like being in a prisoner of war camp. It was just awful. But what a bunch of lads. And when I was at a reunion a few years ago with the guys, and I was pally. Martin Buchan and I were quite pally. I used to bide at Martin's if I bade a night in Fraserburgh. And just big characters, but really, really good people. Played with Chris Slavin at Broch, but I also played with Chris at Vale. Again, he was farmed out for Aberdeen. And just tremendous memories. So that year out for me, I think, was a big mistake. Because the year after, that's when I played with Ian at Portsoy again, and then I went and played for Turriff in the juniors.
Playing for Portsoy again, how did you find that? Was it a bit, in terms of obviously it's a step kind of down?
I wasn't using them, but it was a stepping stone for me to get myself match fit for pre-season training for Highland League, because the welfare was played in the summer. But there were some cracking lads played for Portsoy at that time. And a lot of the boys still to this day will say, I was Ian Jess. They were Ian Jess's minder, but Ian didn't need much minding. He was just far too quick for people. His brain was too quick, as well as his feet been too quick. But it was a lovely period playing back in the welfare team. And I think we won a few cups that year, but maybe didn't win the league. So
did it just get you back to kind of loving football again and just?
I'd already made up my mind. Had a couple of clubs interested in me, and I'd already made up my mind. I was either going to go back and play Highland League or go back and play junior. I had a couple of hiatuses actually in my career, and that time I went and played for Turriff United. And then after a few years with Turriff, I took another, I think 6 months, maybe 9 months out. Maybe that's why I kept my fitness all the time. I didn't can. And then Alan Scott persuaded me to go back and play for Deveronside. And Beth Turriff and Deveronside, again, were littered with really good people. Folk that I'm still friendly with today. And I probably only left Deveronside because I thought I wanted to have a crack at it. And Deveronside were a Highland League club in all but name. I mean, the money that they were throwing about was ridiculous, Sean. And I was a bit of a mercenary at that stage of my career, and I just wanted to get a bit of money under my belt. But I ended up going and having a tremendous experience at Deveronside. Played there for a few seasons and won Player of the Year, or not just locally, but the Hill North section, and really enjoyed my time there. We won the Zamoyski Trophy one year, which was like played with the Dundee teams, and again that was a different level. You were playing with these guys that were top-notch junior players, which is about equivalent with Highland League and Dundee, but we went through and we won the tournament. I remember playing in the cup final down at Downfield, and Paul Hegarty, Paul Sturrock, David Neary, all that great Dundee United team were watching, and we absolutely played brilliantly that day. We won 1-0, but it could have been a lot easier. We played so well. So you come to the North Juniors, and everybody thinks you're just a soft touch. So we kind of used that to our advantage.
Yeah, I was going to say, people, it's a common thing, and then it can be the opposite, because every time juniors come up or something, everyone expects them to kick the shit out of you. I mean, that's the stereotypes.
Alan Scott, our manager, just didn't have that in his vocabulary. He just wouldn't even discuss the idea of getting beat in any game. Alan used to sulk if he got beat. He was just one of these guys that was all about winning. But again, he was a tremendous manager and a really, really good friend. I mean, I miss Alan. He was such a football man and such a good person that he's left a huge hole behind in the Hill North of Scotland football scene when Alan died.
Yeah, so in terms of Deveronside, do you think at that point when you said they were kind of throwing money, do you think they could have probably, if the pyramid system kind of existed, they would have...
Absolutely. I think the pyramid system would have suited them. I actually think they would have merged with the Vale. That was the plan, that they would merge with the Vale. But ironically, at that time, there was a lot of enmity between the clubs. Billy Anderson was managing the Vale, and Alan was managing Deveronside, and the two of them just didn't get on at all. And ironically, a few years later, they patched things up, and they ended up working with each other at Buckie. I always find that really ironic, because I think if they had been closer, they could have made that merger work. I think Deveronside started this social club in the middle of a
Aye,
quiet area in Banff, and
aye.
well, as you'll know, being a Banff lad, and it just was a goldmine. And they were able to lure players. I mean, some of the players that played for Deveronside at that time, Stuart Baird, Stevie Patterson's brother Andy, Raymond Carno, Graham Tallis, Gary Innes, Davy Perry, were all guys that would have been playing Highland League football, but were ending up playing junior football.
Obviously, you've got the pyramid kind of now. Do you think like teams like that, there's potential for them to go up, or is it the sort of thing you need to have kind of a bottomless kind of pit to kind of throw at it?
You need to have a lot of money, and what I tend to find now with the pyramid, I'm not against the pyramid system. I think it's all right. It's got its merits. But if you look at a club like Brechin come and do, and they're find it hard to get back up, and you're looking at clubs like Buckie, and do they really want to get promoted into that league? Well, obviously they want to win the games, and obviously they're not the type of team that would roll over. But financially, that could be a millstone round a club like Buckie's neck, and I'm just not sure if the practicalities will work out. I like the ethos of the pyramid system, because you're right, it gives teams like Deveronside for had an unlimited ambition. But now, Deveronside, if they had gone through that, they would struggle to cope with that now, because they hadn't got that back in anymore.
I was going to say, even Highland League, if you think the amount of because I remember speaking to someone, they were saying you have to upgrade your stand,
Yep.
you have to have floodlights up to a certain standard, you have to have this, you have to have that. It takes a lot, because it was last year they had Strathspey finish bottom of the league, but didn't face a playoff because every team didn't qualify for have the right licensing in place. So it's kind of no, it's just you want the Highland League to get freshened up sometimes near the bottom end. I always feel like.
I get that as well. And if you look at the additions, I didn't think it's a bad thing like a Strathspey will get in, like a Banks of D and clubs like that. Very ambitious clubs. We huge backing, a huge catchment area. I think it's hard to for me, even if I was saying to you I'm not a believer in the pyramid system, it's difficult to argue against it, because it's standing in the way of clubs that are ambitious and they want to do well. If you look at what Cove have done, I mean, Cove are an amateur team in Aberdeen, and then they became a junior team, and then a Highland League team, and now they're a senior team.
Yeah.
And they want to rest until they're in the Premiership, the winner.
Yeah, so going back to your playing career, you mentioned you were at Cove. What are your kind of favourite memories from that time?
Well, that was the season that Cove won their first trophies. They weren't long in the Highland League. I would have probably been at Deveronside, but Alan Scott's came to me and he said, look, I can't wait to play Highland League for another year. There's a few clubs interested in you. So what I did was I went and I played a pre-season game for Forest Mechanics up at Forest, and I played a pre-season game for Peterhead, down at Peterhead, and I played really well. And I think it was Harry was up at Forest, and he wanted to sign me. Peterhead wanted to sign me. And then out of the blue, Alan said, oh, Cove have put in a bid for you. Cove want you to go and sign for them. And I think, retrospectively, if it happened, I think Alan had phoned Dave Watson to tell Dave I was available. Because I think David I was fancied me as a player when he'd played against me or managed against me or seen me playing for Deveronside. So I went in and played a game for them against Hibs, a friendly, and played really well out of the 3 games, and then sat down with the chairman, Mr. McCrae, afterwards with Dave, and basically just thrashed out a deal then and signed on that day and ended up playing. And initially things were great with Cove. I mean, we won a couple of cup competitions and I was playing regularly. It was a difficult team. First time in my career that I wasn't really the top dog, that I was somebody if I had to fight to play. But the guys themselves were really good guys. Graham Park, Dougie Baxter, Raymond Dewell, Mike Megginson, the late Ronnie Brown, the Patterson brothers, Mikey Cormack. They were really good players and really good lads. I mean, I loved my time there. But I think I could tell you the game that Dave Watson changed his mind about me. We were playing up at Elgin in a league game, and he'd made me captain for the night. I think Ronnie was maybe injured, and he put me in at sweeper. And we were controlling the game quite well, and I went in for a 50-50 tackle, and I tried to dink it out of the guy at command, and he came through me. I won the ball, I knocked it forward, and I scored a goal. And I looked out at the dugout, and I could see Dave Watson's face, and I thought, he's changed his mind about me. And almost from that day, I had to fight to get in that team. In the cup final, qualifying cup final, we played up at Huntly against Fraserburgh. I'd played the previous 3 or 4 games. I think Dave was by the way, I got ill well against Dave. He's a really good lad. And it sometimes happens in football. Someday they think you're a player or they dinner. I found it very helpful for me when I went on to do a wee bit of managing and coaching myself about how to treat players. So I learned a lot for that experience. I'm no blaming Dave, but played that 3 or 4 games. I remember playing up at Keith, and it was man of the match, and didn't even think. And my drive up to Huntly, because I just came up for Portsoy, and all the Aberdeen guys were coming out. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be really annoyed if I'm on the bench because I've been doing so well. And when we got up there, and Dave said, Grant, can I have a word with you outside? And I thought, here we go, I'm going to be on the bench. I wasn't even on the bench. I was absolutely raging. But I had enough about me to say, I didn't want to make a bit of fuss to put the rest of the guys off, so I just kept my counsel. But that was me kind of finished. I never played another game after that. That was kind of a bit towards the end of the season. And then Turriff United came in for a bid, and I went back to Turriff United as player coach with Alan Scott and finished out the season with them. So it was a disappointing end, but I had some really super memories with Cove. I mean, the guys themselves, as I say, were really good players, and I'd probably was as good a team as I'd played in. They were just brushing teams aside. But again, we just lost narrowly out in the league title.
Yeah. So I'm going on to, you mentioned you scouted for Aberdeen. How did that come about?
Just really through chance. My pal that I played with Deveronside, Graham Tallis, was friendly with Colin Grant. And Colin wanted somebody to look at a guy that was playing for, I think it was Queen's Park, up at the AstroTurf at Buckie. It was no long open. And Graham phoned me and asked if I would go to the game. So he gave Colin my number. Colin phoned me up, and it was just a one-off initially because I'm kind of a bit of an English teacher that I'd written a really good report, and Colin had said, "Want you to come on board full time?" So I did it for a few years, and I really enjoyed it. But my wife kind of took ill with ovarian cancer, and I kind of just found it really time consuming doing the school football on a Saturday, watching games on Saturday afternoon, watching games all day Sunday. And I was quite pally with George Yule. I was a chairman at that time, and I just said to them, look guys, I'm going to have to stop here. I just can't continue doing this. But that's something I might go back to at some point. I'll see. But I enjoyed it. It was great going and seeing. But that was the bit I always found interesting. You went to some of these clubs and you could see the annoyance in some of the coaching and committee's faces. I mean, my attitude when people come to watch my guys, when I was playing school, coaching school football, I was delighted because it said something about you and your school team or your junior, whatever team, that people were coming to watch your players. But clearly I was in the minority. I mean, there are some good guys, like a Tiger Porter up at Elgin. Never had a problem with Tiger. I just used to phone him up and say, I'm going up to watch one of your guys. Aye, no bother, come in for a cup of tea. But by and large, I was, just as you say, this tension with clubs wanting to hold on to their players. And I totally get it. But for me, I think it's one of the big pitfalls of Scottish football, I think.
Yeah. So who were was there any players that ended up playing, came through the Aberdeen ranks or maybe
probably the guys was involved in the recruitment of Terry Taylor. Terry is doing it in Charlton now.
Oh yeah, because he played for Wolves. Was he?
Sure, no, Terry. I think Terry and his dad Graham was a pal. I ken Graham quite well. Terry, when he was younger, had lots of ability. Was a bit chubby, but Aberdeen kept with him, and I think they would have signed him. But I think Graham and Terry felt that they would be better served going to an English club, so went to Wolves, and then I think he went to Burton, and then he's now with Charlton.
Nice, so he's doing pretty pretty well. So
And I used to help out somebody with like if the Dennis Law tournament was in, I would go in and look after the lads. Kind of if the boys were staying in accommodation at Robert Gordon's, the university, they didn't want the guys staying on their own, so I went in to be like the dad figure, and that was when guys like Scott McKenna and that were coming through the system, and he was just a great guy to work with. It was pretty clear that he was going to have a chance of making it at a higher level. And then 6 months later, I saw Scott, and he turned into this unit of a boy. Matty Cooper at Swiel, going to sign Matty for Aberdeen. But a lot of the guys, Robbie Bruce, you wouldn't have heard of Robbie. Robbie was a Cullen lad. And I thought Robbie was the best player I'd ever seen playing in the north of Scotland. And I thought he got a raw deal with the Dons. I remember saying to George Jewell, if you're not going to sign this kid, there's no any point of having somebody scouting in this area. But you learn to take it no personally, Sean. Football is all about opinion. I would never say my opinion was correct ahead of other people. And it's such a difficult decision for guys in Aberdeen. They've got a pile of guys in Aberdeen. They've got a pile of guys in the centre doing at Glasgow. And you're having to pick guys of a pretty equal level to try and get a contract to get them into the under-18s and that. And it's such a difficult thing to do. So I disagreed with him, but I wouldn't be too critical.
Yeah, there seems to be the common trend that Highland League clubs seem to pick up players who were maybe released and then they kick them. Or like there was a guy who got what's his name? He was at Turriff, I think and then Aberdeen signed him again.
Yes.
Yeah. I
can't remember his name. My daughter's a PE teacher at Turriff, and she asked me to come and have a look at him. He's such a good player.
Yeah, it's stuff like that. You always hear kind of stories like him, and then there's been.
But to be fair to clubs like Aberdeen and Neil Simpson, the pioneer this at Aberdeen, they decided that they weren't doing these kids any favours, and they developed a system where there was a release system in place that allowed these players to go to another club. Sometimes it would be like Carlisle County, sometimes it would be Highland League club. So there was a pathway for these players when they didn't make it. And I think for me, probably as a teacher now, I'm much happier with that holistic view than I am coaching somebody for 10 years and then just saying, there's a door, we're not signing you. I just never sat easy with me at all. Clubs are taking that far more seriously now.
Yeah. So in terms of young players in kind of Northeast, who are the sort of players do you think we should kind of keep an eye out, whether that's, juniors or Highland League or just generally that you think?
I'm so out of the loop now. So I went up to watch a couple of Bucky games at the end of last season. And my pal Ian, he watches Buck every week and he keeps me up to speed with it, and it was getting so exciting. I went up to see the last two games. In the very last game, that the Brechin game, my pal for Inverness, John Mackay, used to play for Brora. John and I did the North of Scotland school team together. So John came down and we just had a day watching a football. And during the warm-up, this guy shouted out at him, "Aye, Mr. Mackay, aye, Mr. Smith." And it was Josh Peters, and I never realised we'd coached Josh. And I was speaking to John there not long ago, and he was saying the amount of guys that we had through the north of Scotland are now playing Highland League football is quite remarkable. But John would tell you better than me. I'm just tons out of the loop. There's a wee lad, I should have probably mentioned his name, there's a wee lad in Portsoy who is going to be a player and a half. He's in Aberdeen books just now, and he's just exceptionally talented. It's a guy called Fletcher Boyd, and he's got to be a player. When I hear people for Aberdeen speaking about him, I haven't heard them speaking about a player like this in a long period of time. And if he can keep his feet in the ground, I think he's a guy that will do really well in football.
Yeah, there seems to be. Yeah, I remember when Josh Peters got the move to Hibs. I remember all the clubs were tapping him up.
But a good example, because he's a lad that wasn't even in the north of Scotland trials. He never got sent to trial. We played a friendly game and we thought we were locking in a particular area of the park. And John happened to be teaching it. I think it was at King UC at the time. And he said, "I've got this guy. It's really quite raw." He says, "But I think he's better than what we've got." and we just took Josh along just really to see if it would make a difference. And he just has turned into a terrific player.
Yeah. I always wondered if he would have played at a kind of higher level because he was at Livy as well. So
But I think that's just the thing. You never know. You give some people that opportunity and they excel. I mean, when I saw like Ian as a youngster, if you said to me Ian would have gone on to play for Aberdeen, Coventry, Forest, Bradford, his kind of international cups, I probably would have said perhaps, but no, definitely. I mean, he was a great player. You never really know to get the chance. Ian was lucky. He got the opportunity at Aberdeen. He went in for a trial, really, with George for a few weeks, and they really liked him in there and gave him an opportunity. And you never know what a kid can do unless you give him an opportunity.
yeah. So you said you coached a kind of a lot of kids over the years. Were there any kind of standouts or kind of players that maybe went
I,
unnoticed?
I definitely the boys in the Highland League just now, like a Harry Noble, did Harry at Vale, Innes Mackay, Kyle Golden, if you mind him, I know it was at Vale. Wee
Aye.
Joe Sutherland, it was at Buckie. Ben Allen, it's the Vale, had Ben at the north of Scotland. Callum Murray, Kazi, was one of my lads when I was at Buckie High School. North of Scotland, they did Matty Cooper, Scotty Ferris, Billy Ferris's laddie. I was really surprised. He got a bad injury at a crucial time. He's one of the best players I've ever seen at that level. Scotty was just an absolute super player. And the player for me that the other clubs have missed out on is Graham Roger. It's at Formartin. I played with Graham's dad at Deveronside. And Graham is one of the most committed players I've ever played with. Him and his brother Neil. I mean, they used to fight with each other at training. And when I first saw young Graham, I was straight on. I didn't even think I was scouting for Aberdeen at the time, but I tried George Adams to pick him up for Ross County because Derek was the manager at the time. But again, it was just this old adage that no, they hadn't been training and playing with a club at that level. And I think young Graham would have definitely made it in senior football. His desire and his hunger aligned with his ability. He was just still is an outstanding player.
Yeah. Was there ever talk of him going a higher level? Because I've not really heard. I mean,
Well, that was the talk. I tried to get him up to county, and there was a couple of English clubs kind of had connections with because Ian was working for Forest at the time. But it's just for some reason or other, I think it's so far up north here that English clubs want to come up and have a lookie. Aberdeen weren't interested. I mentioned it to Colin, I think, at the time. It was just one of these things. Again, it's about opinion. But I thought Graham's attitude alone would have given him a chance. But aligned with his ability and his athleticism would have given him a real chance. For me, he's one of the top players, I would have said, in the Highland League in the last certainly 10 years.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. And make sure you subscribe on Podbean, Apple, Spotify, or any of your chosen podcast platforms. Also, any reviews left would be much appreciated and help the podcast grow. Hope you can join me next time for another interesting interview.